Captain Jake Morrison stared at the scanner readings for the third time. The numbers made no sense. What looked like an ordinary asteroid was giving off energy signatures that should not exist. "Pete, run another scan," Jake called to his engineer. The mining ship New Haven had been working the asteroid belt for 6 months without finding anything unusual. Now this. Pete Walsh wiped his hands on his coveralls and walked over to the control panel. "Same readings, Captain. That rock is definitely not natural." Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her research station. As the ship's xenoarchaeologist, she studied alien artifacts for the Earth Science Council. Her job was usually boring on mining runs. Today felt different. "Captain, I need to see that asteroid up close," Lisa said. "Those energy patterns match theoretical models for ancient technology." Jake rubbed his beard. He was 45 years old and had been flying mining ships for 20 years. He trusted his instincts, and his instincts said this discovery would change everything. "Danny, prep the shuttle," Jake ordered. Danny Brooks was their best EVA technician. If anyone could get them close to the asteroid safely, it was him. 2 hours later, the shuttle approached what they thought was a space rock. Up close, it looked even stranger. The surface had a metallic shine that natural asteroids never had. Strange patterns covered the hull like frozen lightning. "This thing is huge," Danny whispered. "At least 3 kilometers long." Lisa ran her portable scanners over the surface. "The material composition is impossible. These elements don't exist in our periodic table." Jake activated his comm unit. "New Haven, we need Amy Foster down here. If this is really alien technology, we need our linguist." Amy Foster was 28 years old and spoke 17 human languages. More importantly, she had studied alien communication methods for years. When she arrived on the shuttle, she brought every scanning device the ship had. "The patterns on the hull look like writing," Amy said, running her gloved hand over the strange symbols. "But they're not like any alien language we've discovered." Danny was checking the shuttle's equipment when his safety line got tangled. He reached out to steady himself against the asteroid's hull. The moment his glove touched the surface, everything changed. Light exploded across the asteroid. Blue energy raced through the strange patterns like water flowing through channels. The symbols began to move, shifting and changing as if they were alive. "Everyone back to the shuttle now," Jake shouted, but Amy could not move. She watched the symbols dance across the hull, and somehow they seemed familiar. Not the shapes themselves, but the way they moved, like they were trying to tell her something. "Wait," Amy said. "Look at the patterns. They're responding to us." She was right. When Danny had touched the hull, the symbols near his hand had glowed brighter. When Amy moved closer, different sections lit up. The ancient craft was reacting to human presence. "We need to report this immediately," Lisa said. "This could be the most important archaeological find in human history." Jake nodded. "New Haven, send an emergency message to Earth Command. Tell them we found something big." The message traveled through hyperspace to Earth in 3 days. The response came back in 6 hours. Every major power in the galaxy was sending ships to investigate. The first to arrive were the Zephyrians. Their ships looked like silver teardrops that bent space around them. High Commander Zithka was 7 feet tall with gray skin and black eyes that showed no emotion. "This vessel belongs to the Zephyrian Collective," Zithka announced over the comm. "Our historical records show evidence of ancient technology in this system." Next came the Mantari Empire. Their ships were massive metal cubes covered in weapon systems. Science Prime Kelithara had 4 arms and spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "The Mantari Empire claims salvage rights," Kelithara declared. "Our technology is superior. We can unlock this vessel's secrets." The crystalline hegemony arrived last. Their ships looked like floating gems that sang as they moved through space. Elder Crystal Humra spoke through light patterns that Amy's translator barely understood. "This craft predates all known civilizations," Humra said. "It should be studied by the eldest races first." Jake found himself surrounded by alien fleets, all demanding access to the ancient vessel. The situation was getting dangerous fast. "With respect to all parties," Jake transmitted to the alien ships, "humanity discovered this craft. We should work together to understand it." The aliens laughed. Not literally, but Amy could hear the dismissal in their responses. Humanity was the youngest species in the galaxy. What could they possibly understand about ancient technology? For 3 days, the aliens tried everything. They sent their best scientists, their most advanced scanning equipment, their most powerful computers. Nothing worked. The craft remained sealed, its symbols continuing to flow but showing no signs of opening. Amy spent those 3 days studying the patterns. She noticed something the aliens missed. The symbols changed based on who was looking at them. When Zephyrians approached, the patterns became rigid and mathematical. When Mentari scientists came close, they turned into complex technical diagrams. With the crystalline hegemony, they became abstract art. But when humans got near, something different happened. The symbols became warmer, more flowing. They moved like music or poetry instead of data. "Captain," Amy said on the third evening, "I think this ship is trying to communicate with us specifically." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Watch." Amy floated toward the hull in her EVA suit. As she got closer, the symbols near her began to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. When she felt curious, they became more complex. When she felt peaceful, they glowed softer. "It's reading my emotions," Amy whispered. That night, while the alien fleets argued over access rights, Amy made a decision. She put on her EVA suit and went outside alone. She floated to the ancient craft and placed both hands on its hull. "I don't know if you can understand me," she said quietly, "but we want to learn, not to conquer or control, just to understand." The ship responded immediately. The symbols under her hands began to shift and change. They formed new patterns that somehow felt like words, like thoughts, like welcome. And then, impossible as it seemed, a doorway appeared in the hull where none had existed before. The ancient craft had awakened and it wanted humans to come inside. Amy stared at the doorway that had appeared in the ancient hull. The opening was perfectly shaped for humans, as if the ship had measured them and created an entrance just for their size. "Amy, get back to the shuttle immediately," Jake's voice crackled through her comm system. "Captain, you need to see this," Amy replied. The ship opened a door for us. Within minutes, Jake was floating beside her with Security Chief Karen Bell and Pilot Rick Chen. The four humans looked at the doorway that glowed with soft blue light. "The alien fleets are going crazy," Karen reported. "Their sensors can't even detect the opening. To them, it looks like solid hull." Jake made the decision that would change everything. "We're going inside." "Karen, you're with me." "Rick, stay with the shuttle. If anything goes wrong, get back to New Haven immediately." The moment Jake and Karen entered the doorway behind Amy, the ancient craft came alive around them. Lights appeared along the corridors. Not harsh white light like human ships used, but warm golden light that felt welcoming. The air changed too. Amy's suit sensors showed that the atmosphere was becoming breathable. The temperature rose to a comfortable level. Even the gravity adjusted to match Earth normal. "How is this possible?" Karen whispered. "The ship is reading our biology and adapting to us." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were covered in the same flowing symbols they had seen outside, but now the patterns moved in response to their presence. When Amy felt amazed, the symbols glowed brighter. When Karen felt nervous, they pulsed slowly as if trying to calm her. "It's like the ship is alive," Jake said. After 20 minutes of walking, they found themselves in a massive chamber at the heart of the vessel. The room was beautiful beyond description. The walls curved upward like the inside of a flower, and in the center stood something that could only be a control system. But it was unlike any control panel they had ever seen. Instead of buttons and screens, there was a flowing, organic interface that pulsed with gentle light. It looked more like art than technology. Amy approached the interface carefully. As she got closer, the patterns became more complex, more welcoming. She could feel the ship's attention focusing on her like a patient teacher, waiting for a student to understand. "Amy, be careful," Karen warned, her hand moving toward her weapon. "I don't think it wants to hurt us," Amy replied. "I think it's been waiting for someone to talk to." Back outside, the alien fleets were not happy. High Commander Zithka paced his bridge like a caged animal. His sensors showed that humans had somehow entered the ancient vessel, but his own teams could not even find the entrance. "Impossible," Zithka muttered. "Humans are barely out of their home system. How can they access technology that we cannot?" Science Prime Kelthera was having the same problem. Her most advanced scanning equipment showed the humans moving inside the craft, but when her teams approached the hull, they found only solid metal. "There must be some trick," Kelthera declared. "Human technology is primitive. They cannot possess keys to ancient secrets that we do not." Elder Crystal Humera was the most disturbed of all. The crystalline hegemony had legends about ancient vessels that chose their operators. She had thought those legends were myths. "Send a message to the human ship," Humera ordered. Demand that they share their access method immediately. The message reached Captain Morrison on the New Haven Bridge. Pete Walsh was monitoring communications while Danny Brooks watched the alien fleets with growing concern. "Captain Morrison," came Humra's translated voice, "you will explain how your people entered the ancient vessel, or we will consider this an act of theft." Morrison activated his comm system. "With respect, Elder Humra, we're as surprised as you are. We don't understand how the ship opened for us either." This was true, but the aliens did not believe it. To them, it seemed impossible that the galaxy's youngest species could access technology that their advanced civilizations could not. Inside the ancient craft, Amy was learning things that would change everything. When she touched the organic interface, images flowed into her mind, not painful but overwhelming in their beauty and sadness. She saw a civilization that had existed millions of years ago. They were not like any species she knew. They were tall and graceful, with eyes that held incredible wisdom. But more than their appearance, she could feel their emotions, their values, their dreams. These beings, who called themselves the First Builders, had created the ship as more than just a vessel. It was a test, a teacher, a guardian of knowledge that could reshape the galaxy. "What are you seeing?" Jake asked, watching Amy's face change as she interfaced with the ship. "They weren't conquerors," Amy whispered. "They were gardeners. They traveled the galaxy planting seeds of wisdom, hoping that someday a species would grow mature enough to understand." The ship showed her more. The First Builders had encountered younger races before. They had offered their knowledge to many species over the millennia. Some had been too aggressive, wanting only weapons. Others had been too fearful, rejecting the technology entirely. A few had been too proud, believing they already knew everything worth knowing. But humanity was different. The ship had been watching human space for decades, studying their communications, their art, their reactions to first contact with other species. It had seen something in humans that it had not found in others. What did it see in us? Karen asked. Amy smiled, tears floating in the zero gravity. Curiosity without conquest. We want to learn, not to control. We ask questions instead of making demands. Outside, the alien fleets were growing impatient. Zephyrian reality-bending weapons were charging. Mentari world crackers were targeting the asteroid. The crystalline hegemony was preparing to phase the entire area into another dimension. But inside the ancient craft, something wonderful was happening. The ship was beginning to trust its new human visitors. It started sharing its name with Amy, a concept that translated roughly as Harmony's Edge. The ship had a personality, she realized. It was lonely. It had been waiting for so long that it had almost given up hope of finding a species worthy of the First Builder's legacy. "We need to get back to New Haven," Jake said. "The alien fleets are getting aggressive, and our people need to know what we've found." Amy nodded, but she was reluctant to leave. The ship felt like home in a way she could not explain. When they reached the entrance, she turned back to look at the corridors that had welcomed them. "We'll be back," she promised. The ship pulsed once with warm light, and Amy knew it understood. As they exited through the doorway, it sealed behind them. To the alien observers, it looked like humans had simply materialized outside the hull. Their sensors could not detect how the humans had gotten inside or how they had gotten out. The message that Jake sent to Earth Command that night would start a diplomatic crisis that would spread across the galaxy. But it would also begin humanity's greatest adventure, as they learned that they had been chosen to inherit the wisdom of the universe's oldest civilization. The ancient craft had indeed awakened, and it had found something in humanity that no other species possessed. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted 18 hours. Representatives from 47 different species gathered on the neutral station at Kepler Prime to discuss what everyone was calling the human situation. Ambassador Helen Price represented Earth in the heated debates. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her voice carried the weight of humanity's growing reputation as diplomatic problem solvers. "The ancient vessel chose to open for humans," Helen stated calmly. "We did not break into it. We did not force our way inside. We simply approached with respect and curiosity." High Commander Zithka stood 7 feet tall at his speaking platform. "Impossible. The Zephyrian Collective has technologies that predate human civilization by millennia. If this vessel truly contains ancient knowledge, we have the greater claim." Elder Crystal Humra's light patterns flickered with annoyance. The crystalline hegemony maintains the most complete historical archives in the galaxy. Our records speak of the first builders, though we believe them to be legend. Science Prime Kelthera's forearms gestured angrily. The Mantari Empire's computational power exceeds all others. We should be analyzing this discovery, not discussing it with primitives. But as the debates raged, other voices began to speak. Ancient species that rarely participated in council meetings were sharing fragments of legend and half-remembered stories. The ethereal collective's representative, a being of pure energy named Zareth, materialized at the central podium. Our oldest memory crystals contain references to the waiting ships, vessels that would seek out those worthy of ancient wisdom. Commander Vale of the Obsidian Fleet nodded his massive head. The warrior codes of my people speak of tests that cannot be won by strength alone. Perhaps the humans succeeded because they did not try to conquer. Back at the asteroid, Amy was spending every possible moment inside Harmony's edge. Each visit revealed new wonders and new responsibilities. The ship was teaching her, but slowly, carefully, making sure she could handle each revelation. The first builders were incredible, Amy told Jake as they floated in the ship's main chamber. They didn't just build technology, they built wisdom into everything they created. Jake watched the organic interfaces pulse around them. What kind of wisdom? They understood something that most species never learn, Amy replied. Power without wisdom destroys everything it touches. They built this ship to find people who could handle knowledge responsibly. The ship showed her images of other species that had failed the test, civilizations that had sought the first builders' technology for conquest, races that had wanted to use ancient wisdom to dominate their neighbors, species that had been so focused on power that they could not see the greater purpose. What happened to them? Jake asked. Some destroyed themselves with weapons they couldn't control. Others became so obsessed with power that they forgot how to grow, how to learn, how to connect with others. They became empty shells of what they once were. Rick Chen, who had joined them on this visit, was studying the ship's navigation systems. What he found amazed him. Captain, this ship has been to places that don't show up on any star charts. Systems that might not even exist in our dimension. The ship's memories were vast beyond imagination. It had traveled the galaxy for millions of years, visiting thousands of civilizations. It had seen the rise and fall of empires that made current galactic powers look like children playing with toys. But it had also seen beauty. Worlds where different species lived in harmony. Civilizations that chose art over war, exploration over exploitation, wisdom over power. These were the societies the first builders had hoped to nurture. Why us? Karen Bell asked during one of their visits. What makes humans special? Amy touched the interface and felt the ship's response flow through her mind. We're not special because we're better than others. We're special because we're still growing. Most species reach a point where they think they know everything. We keep asking questions. Outside, the alien fleets were growing larger and more threatening. The Zephyrians had brought reality displacement weapons that could phase the entire asteroid into another dimension. The Mantari had deployed world-cracker missiles that could shatter a planet. The crystalline hegemony had ships that could manipulate time itself. Dr. Helen Price, the ship's medic, was becoming concerned about Amy's condition. Each time Amy interfaced with the alien ship, her brain patterns changed in ways that human medical science could not explain. Amy, you need to take a break, Helen warned. These neural changes could be permanent, but Amy could not stop. The ship was sharing memories that were too important to ignore. She saw the first builders' final days when they realized that they had become too advanced for their own good. They had transcended physical existence, becoming beings of pure thought and energy. They left the ship as their final gift, Amy explained to the assembled crew. They knew that someday a species would emerge that could handle their legacy responsibly. They built Harmony's Edge to wait for that species. Troy Adams, the communications officer, was monitoring alien transmissions. The news was not good. Captain, the alien fleets are preparing for military action. They're demanding immediate access to the ship or they'll take it by force. Jake knew they were running out of time. The situation was becoming a powder keg that could explode into galactic war. But every time he suggested leaving, Amy insisted they needed to learn more. The ship is preparing for something, Amy told him. I can feel it in the interface patterns. It's getting ready to make a choice. When what kind of choice? Whether humanity is truly ready for what it has to offer. The ship's tests were becoming more complex. It showed Amy scenarios where humans had access to incredible power. technologies that could reshape reality, weapons that could destroy star systems, knowledge that could make humanity the dominant force in the galaxy. In each scenario, the ship asked the same question: what would humanity do with such power? Amy felt the weight of the entire species on her shoulders. The ship was not just testing her personally. Through her, it was testing all of humanity. Her choices would determine whether humans were worthy of the first builder's legacy. "I can't make this decision alone," Amy told Jake. "This affects everyone. What does the ship want you to choose?" Amy looked at the flowing patterns of light around them. "I think it wants to see if we'll choose wisdom over power. If we'll use what it gives us to help others grow, not to control them." The final test was coming, and Amy could feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. Soon, she would have to make a choice that would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of every species in the galaxy. The ancient craft had awakened, and now it wanted to see what kind of people it had chosen to trust. The countdown had begun. High Commander Zithka stood on his bridge watching the holographic display that showed 36 hours until his fleet's reality displacement weapons would fire. The weapons would phase the entire asteroid into an alternate dimension where the Zephyrians could study it without interference. "Sir, the humans are still accessing the vessel," reported his tactical officer. "Our sensors show increased energy activity inside the craft." Zithka's black eyes showed no emotion. "It does not matter. In 36 hours, the ancient technology will belong to the Zephyrian Collective." On her command ship, Science Prime Kelthera was making similar preparations. Her World Cracker missiles were charged and ready. If the Zephyrians tried to steal the discovery, she would destroy it rather than let them have it. Better that the knowledge be lost than fall into the wrong hands. Kelthera declared to her bridge crew. Elder Crystal Humora was the most troubled of the alien commanders. Her species had the longest memories in the galaxy, and their archives contained fragments of truth that the others had forgotten. "The legends speak of a final test," she transmitted to her fleet. "The waiting ships were said to offer ultimate power to those they deemed worthy. But they also destroyed civilizations that made the wrong choice." Inside Harmony's Edge, Amy felt the ship's growing urgency. The organic interfaces pulsed faster. The flowing symbols moved with increasing speed. The ancient vessel was preparing for something momentous. "Amy, your neural activity is off the charts," Dr. Helen Price reported from her medical scanner. "Whatever that ship is doing to you, it's accelerating." Amy barely heard her. She was deep in communion with the ship's consciousness, experiencing visions that took her breath away. The ship was showing her possibilities, futures that could exist depending on the choice she made. In one vision, she saw humanity wielding weapons that could shatter stars. Human fleets dominating the galaxy, forcing peace through superior firepower. Other species bowing before human might. In another, she saw Earth transformed into a paradise by first builder technology. Humans living for thousands of years, their bodies perfected, their minds enhanced beyond current imagination. But in this vision, humanity had turned inward, caring only for their own perfection while other species struggled. A third vision showed humanity as galactic police, using ancient knowledge to enforce their vision of justice on every world. Wars ended because humans possessed the power to stop them by force. Crime disappeared because human surveillance technology could see everything. "These are all wrong," Amy whispered, understanding flooding through her. The ship pulsed with approval. She was beginning to see the truth that the first builders had discovered too late in their own evolution. Jake floated beside her, watching her face change as each vision passed through her mind. "What's wrong with them? They all seem like good outcomes." "Because they're all about power," Amy replied. "Even when we use it for good purposes, it's still about us controlling others instead of helping them grow." The ship showed her one final vision, and this one broke her heart. She saw the first builders in their final days, beings of incredible wisdom and power who had transcended physical existence. But they were alone, completely alone, because no other species in the galaxy could communicate with them anymore. They became so advanced that they lost connection with everyone else, Amy said, tears floating in the zero gravity. They realized that ultimate power means ultimate isolation. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the comm system. "Amy, we're receiving ultimatums from all three alien fleets. They're demanding immediate access to the ship's technology, or they'll take military action." Amy felt the ship's attention focus on her with laser intensity. This was the moment of choice. Through the organic interface, she could feel technologies beyond human imagination, waiting to be claimed. Weapons that could protect Earth forever. Knowledge that could make humanity the most advanced species in the galaxy. Power that could solve every human problem by forcing solutions on everyone else. The ship is offering us everything, Amy told her companions. All the power the first builders ever possessed. We could become the dominant force in the galaxy within a generation. That sounds incredible, Rick Chen said. We could bring peace to everyone. By conquering them, Amy replied quietly. By deciding for them what peace should look like. Karen Bell checked her weapon readings nervously. Amy, the alien fleets are powering up their weapons. We need to make a decision soon. The ship's consciousness pressed against Amy's mind, not forcing but insisting that she understand the full implications of her choice. She could feel the weight of galactic history, all the civilizations that had been offered this same choice. Some had chosen immediate power and used it to dominate their neighbors. They had created galactic empires that lasted for thousands of years before collapsing into civil wars that destroyed entire star systems. Others had chosen gradual advancement and become obsessed with their own perfection. They had withdrawn from galactic society, becoming isolated and eventually extinct as they lost the ability to adapt and grow. A few had chosen to become galactic guardians, using ancient technology to enforce peace and justice, but their protection had become control, and the species they guarded had never learned to solve their own problems. All of them had failed the true test. What is the true test? Amy asked the ship directly. The answer came not in words or images, but an understanding that flooded her consciousness. The test was not about being worthy of ultimate power. The test was about being wise enough to refuse it. The first builders had made the same mistake that every advanced civilization made. They had believed that power was the solution to every problem. They had thought that if they just became advanced enough, wise enough, powerful enough, they could fix everything wrong with the galaxy. But power could not create wisdom in others. It could not make species learn and grow. It could only force temporary solutions while preventing real progress. We're not ready, Amy said suddenly. None of us are ready. Not humans, not the aliens, not anyone. Jake stared at her. Amy, this could be humanity's greatest opportunity. We could protect Earth forever. By becoming exactly what we've always said we didn't want to be, Amy replied. By becoming conquerors who happen to have good intentions. The ship pulsed with something that felt like joy. For the first time in millions of years, a species had understood the real lesson the first builders had tried to teach. Amy placed her hands on the central interface and spoke the words that would change everything. We refuse. We're not ready for this power, and we're honest enough to admit it. The ship's response was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded through every corridor, every interface, every symbol. But this was not the light of weapons or defenses. It was the light of recognition of a test finally passed, of wisdom finally found. The ancient craft had offered ultimate power to humanity, and humanity had chosen ultimate wisdom instead. The song began as a whisper that touched every ship in the surrounding fleets. It was not sound in the traditional sense, but something that reached directly into the minds and hearts of every being who heard it. Amy felt the song flow through her as harmony's edge responded to her choice. The ship's consciousness expanded beyond its hull, carrying with it the emotional resonance of humanity's decision. For the first time in galactic history, a species had been offered ultimate power and had chosen to refuse it. On the Zephyrian command ship, High Commander Zyth Ka staggered as the song touched his mind. His species had not felt such emotions for thousands of years. The concepts flowing through the ship's transmission were alien to him. Humility, the recognition of one's own limitations, the courage to admit inadequacy. Sir, our reality displacement weapons are powering down automatically, his tactical officer reported in confusion. Zyth Ka could not speak. He was experiencing something his people had lost when they became focused on conquest and control. For the first time in centuries, he felt doubt about his own superiority. Science Prime Kelthera was having a similar experience on her command vessel. Her forearms trembled as the song showed her emotions that the Mantari Empire had forgotten. The joy of learning from others. The strength found in admitting weakness, the wisdom of choosing growth over dominance, these humans, she whispered. They rejected ultimate power. How is such a thing possible? Elder Crystal Humora was the first to understand. Her species had maintained fragments of the old legends, stories of the first builders that others had dismissed as myth. As the song flowed through her crystalline consciousness, she began to remember truths that her people had forgotten. They passed the test, she announced to her fleet, the test that every species in the galaxy has failed for millions of years. Inside Harmony's Edge, Amy felt the ship's joy like warm sunlight. The ancient vessel had been waiting so long for this moment that it had almost lost hope. Now finally it had found a species that understood the difference between power and wisdom. What happens now? Jake asked, watching the lights flow around them in patterns of celebration. The ship answered by showing them a new kind of interface. Not the overwhelming control systems that could reshape reality, but something gentler, more collaborative. The ship was offering partnership instead of dominance. It wants to teach us, Amy said with wonder, not to give us all the answers, but to help us learn how to ask the right questions. Captain Morrison received the first transmission from the alien fleets 30 minutes later. It came from Elder Crystal Humora herself. Captain Morrison, the crystalline hegemony requests permission to approach the ancient vessel. We wish to learn from what your people have accomplished. Similar messages followed from all three alien fleets. The Zephyrians, who had been preparing for military action, now asked for diplomatic talks. The Mantari, who had been charging their world-cracker weapons, requested scientific cooperation. Over the following days, representatives from across the galaxy arrived at the asteroid. But they came not as conquerors or claimants, but as students hoping to understand what humanity had discovered. Amy became the ship's first human interface, but she was not its only teacher. Harmony's Edge identified others among the crew who showed the emotional maturity to learn from its accumulated wisdom. Jake's steady leadership, Pete's innovative thinking, Karen's protective instincts, Rick's curiosity about the unknown, but more importantly, the ship began teaching alien representatives as well. It showed Zephyrian commanders what their empire had lost when it chose conquest over cooperation. It revealed to Mantari scientists the discoveries they had missed while focusing only on technological advancement. It helped crystalline hegemony elders remember the wisdom their ancestors had possessed before they became obsessed with preserving the past. The ship isn't just human technology, Amy explained to the gathered representatives. It belongs to everyone who's ready to learn from it. The technologies that Harmony's Edge shared were unlike anything anyone had expected. Instead of weapons that could destroy stars, it offered universal translators that could convey emotional meaning along with words. Instead of tools for domination, it provided healing devices that worked by fostering empathy between doctor and patient. Most importantly, it shared communication networks that made deception nearly impossible. When species could truly understand each other's thoughts and feelings, war became almost unthinkable. Dr. Helen Price noticed the changes in Amy during her regular medical examinations. Your brain patterns are stabilizing, but they're different from baseline human. You're developing new neural pathways that shouldn't be possible. Amy smiled. The ship is helping me grow, not changing me into something else, but helping me become more than I was. This was happening to others as well. Humans and aliens who spent time learning from Harmony's Edge found themselves developing new capacities for understanding, empathy, and wisdom. They remained themselves, but they became better versions of themselves. 6 months later, the asteroid belt around Harmony's Edge had become the most important location in the galaxy. Ships from dozens of species arrived daily, their crews hoping to spend time learning from the ancient vessel. A permanent station was built nearby, jointly operated by humans and aliens working together. The station became a place where diplomatic problems were solved through understanding rather than force, where scientific discoveries were shared freely, where different species learned to see the galaxy through each other's eyes. Amy often stood in Harmony's Edge's main chamber, looking out at the activity surrounding them. The ship hummed with contentment. Its long loneliness finally ended. Was this what the first builders hoped for? She asked the ship during one of their communion sessions. The answer came as a feeling of deep satisfaction. The first builders had transcended physical existence, but they had left this gift behind, a teacher that could help younger species avoid the mistakes that had led to their isolation. Jake, now promoted to admiral and commander of the joint human-alien station, often joined Amy in the ship's chamber. "Do you ever regret your choice? We could have had power over the entire galaxy." Amy touched the organic interface and felt the ship's gentle presence in her mind. "We got something better than power over others. We got the ability to help others find their own power." The ship showed them images of what was happening across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to work together. Civilizations that had stagnated for thousands of years were beginning to grow again. Young races were being guided by older ones instead of conquered by them. "The galaxy is healing," Amy said with wonder. Humanity's role in this transformation was unique but not superior. They had become bridges between civilizations, translators of wisdom, teachers who helped others learn rather than forcing solutions upon them. The ancient craft had indeed awakened, and it had found in humanity something that had been missing from the galaxy for millions of years: the wisdom to choose growth over power, cooperation over control, and learning over conquest. In refusing ultimate power, humanity had gained something far more valuable: the respect and partnership of every species in the galaxy, and the knowledge that true strength came not from the ability to control others, but from the wisdom to help others control themselves. The song of Harmony's Edge continued to spread through the galaxy, carrying with it a simple but revolutionary message. The greatest power was the power to choose not to use power at all.